This is a special presentation from the Running Behind podcast. Hello, I'm Joey Metzger.
And I'm Neeraj Egbert, and this is a special panel discussion for the Grace to the Finish campaign.
Grace to the Finish was started by the two of us as an awareness campaign to raise support for immigration advocacy, inclusion, and anti-discrimination, especially amongst the running and trail running communities.
We are not a 501c3 organization, and we are not fundraising. We are here to allow voices to be heard on these issues and steer supporters to relevant organizations, causes, and effort that can help make a difference.
Our mission statement is this: to build an inclusive global community where runners and advocates unite to outrun discrimination, providing support for immigrant services and promoting a culture of belonging to those on the long journey toward justice and safety. Let's all lead the pack in the fight for justice.
And bring hope and comfort to those who have journeyed the furthest.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm thrilled that you're all able to get here. I want to talk, like I said, about the systemic, challenges with immigration and racism and all these barriers to inclusion, and then some of the solutions, some of the hope, and some of the things you are all doing to help with that problem. And I'm going to try to keep this to 60 minutes. If you guys have ever listened to any of my podcasts, you know that's a challenge because, it's called Running Behind. This is what I do. I talk too much. And at the very end, if we've got time, we'll do a little bit of Western States talk because I think that's on some of our people's minds. But I'd like each of you to briefly introduce yourselves, tell us who you are and any organizations you might be representing, and then what moves you to be here today as part of this discussion. And let's start with you, Cristina. You were the first one to join today, so we're going to start with you.
My name is Cristina Regalado. My pronouns are she, her, ella. And I am based in Salt Lake City. I'm a trail runner. I am co-founder of Wasatch Trail Collective, which is a trail running organization in Salt Lake City for people of color. And I'm a former board of director member of Women of the Wasatch, which is a trail running organization for women. And I'm excited to have this conversation with everyone today.
Wonderful. Jason, I think you were next to join. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep, my name is Jason Bahamundi. My pronouns are he and him. I am a Puerto Rican kid born in the Bronx who discovered running and hasn't stopped running for 20 years. I ran so much I decided to start a business called RunTriBike and the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, where our motto is quite simply that there is a spot at the starting line for everybody and every body. And we do what we can to make sure that we showcase diversity on our platform.
Carolina, you're next.
All right. My name is Carolina Rubio-MacWright, and I'm an immigration lawyer, executive director of Touching Land, which is a nonprofit I founded where we teach immigrant rights through somatic practices like food, clay, and running. I am from Colombia. I'm an immigrant, and very much my entire story is connected somehow through immigration, freedom, and I've been running since I was 7 and have never stopped.
Wonderful. And Neeraj, the hamster is working. The connection is there. Why don't you introduce yourself? My partner in the Grace to the Finish campaign.
I thought you maybe only give me maybe 30 seconds at most since I was so late and so bad.
You can have all the time you need.
Well, my name is Neeraj. I am, I'm originally from India, and I am a runner. I started running when I was 44. I'm a physical therapist. I have lived my whole life here in the U.S. in Kentucky. So it's had a few challenges in the process of living here and immigration and stuff like that. What inspires me is just to advocate and speak for immigrants and the struggles and some of the issues that we experience. And I am lucky to be part of this group with Joey. I've always, thought I'd come up with something like this, and you guys are all awesome for all the stuff that you do. But it's nice to be part of a group. So I appreciate
Awesome.
it. It's good to be here.
We had a couple of other panelists. Jim Porter, who is one of the leaders of Opening Doors, based out of Sacramento, very close to the finish line of Western States in Auburn. He is traveling, not able to join us. Francisco Segovia, who is the executive director of COPAL, which is a very prominent immigration advocacy organization here in the Twin Cities, also runs the Immigrant Defense Network. He may or may not join. We don't know. So we'll see if he joins. If he doesn't, that's all right. I will still talk to some of his information and resources that he brought forward.
Here's Francisco.
I was having some issues.
Oh, no, that's fine. We literally just started, so your timing is perfect. Francisco, why don't you give us a brief introduction? Tell us who you are, the organization you represent, and what moves you to take part in this discussion here tonight?
Well, I'm Francisco Segovia. I moved to Minnesota in 1990. I'm from El Salvador. And Minnesota became home in 1990. And about 8 years ago, I became one of the founders of COPAL, Communities Organizing Latino Power in Action, which our mission is to better the quality of life of Latino families in Minnesota. And for obvious reasons, Latinos were heavily impacted by the Metro surge. And a reason why we created the Immigrant Defense Network. But also, it's key to mention that what we saw in Minnesota in December is not new. Immigration and migration's arrests have been happening forever. And so I'm happy and thank you for the invitation to join you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Absolutely. My name is Joey Metzger. My job here today is really to listen and to moderate, to just kind of keep our flow going. I mentioned earlier, my perspective on this is that I've lived most of my life in South Minneapolis. I've been here 35 years. I live, a handful of blocks from where George Floyd was killed, from all the things that you may have seen this winter on the news. Those are blocks from my house, and those are my neighbors and my friends and my colleagues. And so that's my skin in this game. I'm trying to look out. I'm trying to look out for them. So I want to start, guys, talking about the immigrant experience. Carolina, let's start with you. You came from Colombia, and I know it was kind of traumatic. Talk about that experience and what led you to immigrate to the United States.
So I had to migrate to the U.S. when I was 19. I was in law school in Colombia, and we started getting kidnapping threats. So we had to just leave really quickly. We had some connections in Miami, so that's kind of where we landed. And yeah, it was really hard because it was very sudden, and we had to start in a college where we didn't know anyone, and in a city where we didn't really know anyone. And I was lucky that I knew how to speak English, but
so you left Colombia, and I thought I heard in one of your interviews you were studying to be like an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, and that was part of the reason you had to leave. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really. So I was very outspoken, surprise, and and that's what we think was the reason why they started. Because I was the one out of my family, I was the one that was being threatened to be kidnapped, and I started getting followed, and my dad's best friend's son got kidnapped, and so it was too close, too fast, too soon. And so we just left from one day to the other. But I was in law school, studying law and art. And I was very outspoken about politicians and all sorts of things that I disagreed with. And so, we had to leave.
What was some of the first shocks when you got here of things that you noticed that were either good or bad when you first got here that were very different from? I
mean, I felt freedom, I felt like I could walk around and nothing would happen to me. I feel like there are so many simple freedoms that Americans don't realize how lucky you are to be able to have, to not lock your doors, to forget your keys in the car, to there's so many things that that you all don't realize you're so lucky to have. And it's, that was amazing. Just being able to, I think I say this a lot, drive with my windows down and not worry about someone sticking their hands and grabbing my necklace or pulling me out or throwing something into the car. And so just really lucky to be able to study and to be able to, lucky to have a family that had resources. Because I think that was a big shock for me when I went to law school and worked in the border and realized, these people are actually more brave and have gone through a lot harsher things and realities by crossing the border barefoot with no resources, no language, no connections, which is the reason, honestly, why I started, when I decided to become an immigration lawyer, because I felt so I'm so lucky, and it's my duty as someone that was able to succeed to give back. It's my duty to make sure that I can pull as many people up so that they can also get a chance. Yeah.
Francisco, you came to us from El Salvador. What was it that led you here? I know for Carolina there was civil war and all kinds of things going on. What brought you to Minnesota and to the United States?
Well, it was the very same thing, civil war as well. My country, Central America, was going through a civil war. Colombia, obviously, but there is a whole history. Maybe there's another show about the history of Latin American civil wars and conflicts. U.S. involvement.
Started by America.
Yeah. And so my country went through a civil war, and I am a teacher by trade, and I couldn't be there anymore. So migrated without documents, by the way, to the United States, crossed several borders, and then ended up in Florida. But then a friend of mine who used to live here said, "Hey, why don't you come to Minnesota?" There were solidarity committees educating people about the situation in El Salvador, the issues and how people were impacted. Millions of Salvadorians left to many places, but the United States was one of the places. Also Canada, and so that's how I ended up in Minnesota. The realization was that I didn't speak English. In Florida was easier, but not in Minnesota. So I don't think I was much of a help because I didn't speak English at all, and but Minnesota became home.
What do you think that would be like? You did that back in 1990, I think, right? What do you think that would be like if you had to do that today in 2026? How would that experience be different?
The situation at the border, when I crossed the border without papers in Tijuana, the fence wasn't there yet. They were building the fence. And so I understand that right now is a lot more harder, but also bringing people through borders also is a business. And oftentimes I heard that it's business managed by some of the gangs or drug gangs. And so there are so many stories about what happened now, and so many people who don't make it, they disappear. And so it's a lot more harder now than before. And as I hear from other people, the previous to the 90s was a lot easier to cross borders. Now, my first intention was going to Canada. Canada had a different process for accepting immigrants than the United States. But when I got to Minnesota, there was a network of a faith group who will help people who were arrested by ICE right at the border, and will help them to bring them into Canada through, they have a connection with the Canadian embassy. So I was asked if I wanted to move to Canada, but I by then I was like, no, I am fine here, and Minnesota is home. It's a place that I love. I call home now. But but now it's way more expensive and also riskier than before.
Neeraj, I know you came from India. Your story is a little bit different. You came here. Tell us why you came to the United States and how that. I know you've talked about you landed in New York City and you ended up in Kentucky. What was that culture shock like, and what brought you over here to the United States?
Um, when, let's see, I was in college in India, in Delhi, and I heard about the program. It was, just international camp counselors. And I had like two options, two cities they said, well, you can go to. One was Louisville and the other one was El Paso, for absolutely no reason at all other than I figured Louisville was close to Chicago, which, yeah, as an ultra runner, maybe. But I chose to come to Louisville. I came by myself. Um, Gosh, I had like $300 in my pocket, two suitcases. Mama got me ready for camp by
Yeah.
she had got some shorts tailored for me and slacks, and I was ready for summer camp. So that's how I kind of arrived here. It was like a very sort of innocent, hey, I'm gonna go and see America, the land of whatever, the Western movies and things like that. And and then as life went on, changes happened. It was this sense of innocence and coming into the US with this great expectation. And I met some really wonderful people. I am so lucky. Um, and as life went on, of course, I worked and landed up going to school. I went to St. Louis. I got to move there. I went to Washington University, got my doctorate in physical therapy. And, as I came back, I started to realize more about the country and how it looks at immigrants. I think for the first 10 years of my life, I was pretty much just going with the flow, it was great. It was wonderful. And, I got married and all this stuff. And then at some point, I think maybe when I was having kids, I realized America is different. America is, it appears different, but the way it treats immigrants and people of color is yeah, is sometimes really subtle. And maybe it was my naivety that I didn't initially realize. I think back more often now because my older son is 22 and he's the age, 21, he's the age I was when I came here, and I'll look at him and all the things that he does. And I have a certain amount of grief that one, I miss again being here as the only one here. I miss my friends and my family and everybody, but also I do have a little bit of gosh, I can't find the word. I'm not upset, I just wish it was different in how people are accepted in this country.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that way, you'll never know. And part of my process here is to help immigrants understand their rights and for them to know what is acceptable and what's not, and how to
Yeah.
stand for it. And not everything is okay. As a PT, I see immigrants who are working at Amazon and other places who get injured at work and they come to me and they can barely move, and I asked them about the injury, and they're just like, "Oh well, it's okay. It'll be better." And I said, "Do you know that your work has an obligation to take care of you and to provide
Yeah.
decent working conditions for you?" And they're like, "No, we don't want to inconvenience anything." So that's where immigrants come from. We come from like, America is gonna accept us and in some way provide for us. And then you get to this point where you just begin to feel that it's just the capitalism is taking advantage of you. You're being used.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty sick feeling. So with me, with running, I'm going to tie this real quick. But the thing with me with running is this: as an immigrant, I feel kind of lonely in some of the start lines of these races. Maybe
Yeah.
it's here, maybe it's Kentucky, but I've run in 24 states. My goal is to I'll train every state, but it's other places too. When you get there, there is a certain feel to it.
Yeah.
So my effort is, I met these guys. They were from Toronto in a race that I did in Michigan. And their thing was, we need more people of color at the start line. And that's their thing. And it's called Crossing Lines. So you can, reference that. But we need more people of color at the starting
Yeah.
line. We need more people of color at the starting line of races, of schools, of jobs, of people who should and really truly deserve to be taken care of, whether it's healthcare or whether it's their jobs. It is a necessity,
Yeah.
and that's what
You're
I try to
you're
talk about.
covering all three sections
I'm
of
sorry.
my framework. No, this is good. This is
Oh
how my
no.
podcasts go. By the way, we just chat. Christina, I know your folks migrated from Salvador and Mexico. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my mom, also because of the Civil War in El Salvador, came also undocumented, crossed the border, probably around the same time as you, Francisco. She came, I think, in late '89, and then I came about in 1990. And then, yeah, so seeing my childhood was seeing her immigrant experience and trying to get papers and the challenges that she had to fight in order to create her American dream here, essentially. And then my dad, he actually is Chicano, so he is Mexican descent. And his family has lived in Mexico, in California, since California was part of Mexico. And so I'm half Salvadorian, half Mexican. And so I've always had actually even though I was born in America, I've had this internal battle of like an identity crisis almost. I'm like, I'm not Salvadorian enough. I'm not Mexican enough. But I'm also not white. So that's kind of my immigrant experience, if you will, is just kind of split identity. But even growing up too, there's been this underlying tone of racism in just all aspects of life. Like even growing up in school, my parents worked multiple jobs to get their children ahead in life and give them, a chance. And so I remember just before I started high school, they moved us to a school district that they said, they have really high college acceptance rates, and this is going to be really good if we can get you into this school. And so they did it out of good intentions, but I show up and I'm the only brown kid in that high school. And I just remember jokes of like, oh, what company does your dad mow lawns in, and stuff, like jokes like that. And so not that there's anything wrong with mowing lawns and gardening and things like that, but just that implicit like racism and jokes that every day, that going to school and trying to socialize and things like that is very challenging. And then growing up, I felt this responsibility of like, okay, my parents planted this seed on American soil, and they've sacrificed so much to give their kids a better life. So I did everything possible, and my mom had to sacrifice a lot and give up her dreams. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school and higher education, and I became a PA, which is a physician assistant, and I now work at a cancer hospital in urologic oncology, and even in the workforce. In my current job, I'm the only Latina in my department. And so it gives me a lot of like self-fulfillment when I get like Latino patients, and their face lights up when they're like, oh my goodness, my healthcare provider speaks Spanish, and I can relate to them just on a cultural level. But it's just really shown me that, it's representation is important, not just on the start lines, because I totally agree with Neeraj that it feels incredibly lonely to show up to start line and, you're blasting La Chona on your headphones or Suavemente, and you just want to like share and dance, and like there's nobody that can relate to you there. In the workforce, same, having representation is incredibly important. And so that's kind of been my experience as a child of immigrants.
Yeah, this is so eye-opening for somebody who's, like myself. And I thank you for sharing. Jason, I know you're Puerto Rican. You grew up in the Bronx. Were your folks, did they grow up in the Bronx, or did they come from, and obviously Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so you're U.S. citizens, but was there some culture, did your parents come here from Puerto Rico? Was there a transition? What was the culture like growing up in the Bronx as a Puerto Rican kid?
It's a great question. My father was born in Puerto Rico, in Ponce, and he moved to the States in the 3rd grade. My mother was born here in the States, so her mother, my grandmother, was born in San Juan and had to come here to the U.S. And so, the whole New Yorican thing is an actual thing. Like, it's basically, the spot that Puerto Ricans go to is New York City, the Bronx. And I was born there. I lived there until I was in the 5th grade. And I went to school with Jose's and Juans and Marias. And we moved to the suburbs. And all of a sudden there were houses and white picket fences. And there was no bodegas. And it was a whole different world. And I say this with all of my heart to my parents who have both passed. There's a part of me that wishes they hadn't. Because from being 11 or 12 years old until 46 years old, 47 years old, I was trying to be somebody else. I was trying to be accepted in American culture because Hispanics weren't looked upon as contributors to society. They were looked down upon. I would always hear the phrases like, they would say things like, oh, these spics. And I would be like, you do realize like I'm Puerto Rican, right? And they say, but not you. And it's like, no, but yeah, it is me. And I bring up that age of 46, 47, because that's when I met my wife. And she flat out said to me, you are Puerto Rican. You need to be Puerto Rican. You need to stick your chest out and stand up and be proud of who you are and what you do. My wife is white. She is German. And she was telling me this. And I have my hat on, says Puerto Rico. I wear it just about every day now. And it has changed my perception of the world. It has changed my perception of the U.S. Drastically. And when I hear Francisco and Carolina and Cristina and Neeraj's stories, I'm like, I wish I would have been able to tell these stories 30 years ago instead of starting today. And now I know we have to start somewhere. And so I'm glad that I have a platform that I have to be able to talk about these things, because I now have Puerto Ricans coming to me to say, thank you for wearing your Puerto Rican hat and thank you for wearing your Puerto Rican shirt. And I have to turn around and say, you have to thank my white wife because she's the one who encourages me to do this and moved me in this direction. So it's super interesting. And I don't mean to take over your show, Joey, but I'm hearing Carolina say things like we take things for granted, and Neeraj saying things like he feels lonely, and Francisco saying he didn't speak English when he came here, and Cristina talking about her parents and the jokes about being your dad being part of a landscaping company. And I'm like, if we could just hear ourselves talk to each other and understand that these are hurtful words, that like we could make change. And I really wish people go back, rewind, and listen to what Neeraj, Cristina, Carolina, and Francisco said and hear the words. Don't just gloss over them, because it's very easy to do the right thing when you're actually listening to what they're saying.
That's why I have you on the show, Jason, so you can take over and say insightful stuff like that. You're absolutely
I have all my notes,
right.
brother.
I love it. I love it. We're gonna transition into the next section, but you're absolutely right. And my whole thing is more things get solved by listening than speaking. I think you do a lot more. I was an actor by trade, and we were always taught when I went to college for theater and acting, the best work you do on stage is not when you're speaking, not when you're doing facial expressions, when you're literally listening to the other actors on stage. That's when the magic happens. That's when it's real. And that's true in real life too. We need to listen to each other. So I want to transition to talk about all the shit going on, the systemic issues, the current issues. Francisco, I see you smiling down there. Carolina, I know I want to get to you too, because I know you've got a lot to say on this. Let's start with you, Francisco. I know we've had a tough week here in the Twin Cities. We've got the Metro surge, but I know there's more systemic issues that have been going on. Talk about some of the systemic issues with racism related to immigrants and minorities in the BIPOC communities.
I mean, one of the things is that many of us don't, when we come into this place, for instance, the kind of joke that I play to people is like, I didn't know that I was a Latino when I came in 1990 until someone, it was a friend of mine who I spoke with him and I said, hey, why do they chase me at the store in Southdale? Why do they follow me? I don't understand why the security person follows me. And he said, oh, because you are Latino. And I was like, well, and what is that supposed to mean? I didn't even know that I was Latino. Well, because we steal things. Oh, that's a bias. So that was a, and so those are some of the things that was in my mind, right? But then I had the opportunity, like in 1996, I believe, 1998, when I had this job, they sent me to this training called Undoing Racism by the People's Institute. And it was a moment for my brain to dissect my anti-Blackness. But also, it's not only anti-Blackness, but also is anti-Indigenous, which is basically hating ourselves for who we are. And then having an image of somebody else that is not us, right? So our formation, our brain is being formed since the moment that we're born with everything that is that we are exposed to. And some of us, for instance, Catholicism in Latin America is so different than in the United States. And so in the way that Catholicism is being imposed on us, and when you go to church, you have a bunch of images. So your question was what's going on with here, right? So it wasn't about that, but that is a framework of understanding who and how we insert ourselves into that society. We are in a moment where diversity is more accepted. If you go back to the U.S. history, the melting pot was the concept where every white person, European, had to go into this one way of thinking. And so that was the melting pot where you had to give up. If you were German, if you were Irish, if you were whatever, you had to give that up and be absorbed by that English way of being. And not everyone was accepted. I mean, obviously, brown, Asians, and other communities were not accepted. And so, but now we are in the different moment where the diversity is a strength. So say who we are and how we present ourselves is a strength. And so we need to keep each perspective that you, Carolina, Jason, Cristina, and another friend, just something happened with some connection. And also I have a son, my wife is white, and we have a biracial son. So the idea is how my son, he's part white, he also can be feeling proud of who he is. And go back to his roots as well, because we all have roots. What happened is through all these many things of race, we remove our roots and then we become something else. And so reconnecting and feeling proud of who we are is what makes diversity and our diversity of perspectives. Now, when the situation about immigration, if we look at the policy coming down from Washington, it is that immigrants are the vehicle to dismantle democracy. So it is not about going only after us as immigrants, it's going after democracy. We project that elections are not going to be easy. What we had in Minnesota this week, also going after activists, is another layer of attacks in our communities. But I think at the end, it's about democracy and limiting people's ability to vote, I think is what is ahead of us. Obviously, if you want to achieve a goal, who do you hurt first in a community? Those who, according to the systems, may be the weakest one. And one more thing, when it's about going after a community, what you do first, and any system through history, you first remove the humanity of that community. Once you remove the humanity, then you hope that the rest of the society will be okay when you act on them. Something that didn't happen in Minnesota because Minnesotans were not willing to lose that humanity. And that's why I keep to tell Minnesotans, we became more humans by not tolerating that abuse to humanity or to other humans. Yeah. So that's what we have now, and we keep fighting for it.
Yeah. I'm going to get to you, Carolina, but one thing you mentioned in an interview recently, I think you were on with NPR, you talked about this concept of deportation by attrition. And I think you were talking about a school you went into. Can you tell a little bit about that? I think you said like they were just gone. What?
Mm-hmm. So there was a moment where the way in which the system was presenting themselves, if you saw the videos that they were doing, they went into people's home and they had a videographer. The intention was to create terror, to terrorize our communities. And the terror was not only to be inflicted on immigrants, it was pretty much if you were a Black person, many Black people, indigenous people were affected as well, even people with documents. So, but the thing was to create this level of terror that some people, because of documentation or whatever, they will say, you know what, I'm done. I'm leaving now. And so we have a lot of people who have left the United States. And then this person that works at this school, I was asking, so how are kids doing? And she said, we have lost a lot of families, a lot of kids. We don't know where they are. We believe that they have left the United States. Going back home is what they call the self-deportation. So that's and many of those kids probably born here, but also are not gonna have the opportunity to, what's needed here, education, and be a person that can be a productive person in this society.
Wow. Carolina, I know you are on the front lines. You're an immigration attorney. You are at the border. You're in the detention centers. You're in the jails. You're working, I think, is Carlos the gentleman you're working with who is in prison or on death row. Tell us about what's happening in these detention centers and what does it look like today versus what it looked like before, let's say 2015. What did it look like before some of these policies and administrations that came into play that are acting the way they are now?
Yeah, so I think something that folks don't realize a lot is the fact that ICE started, I believe, in 2003, 2004, which is like the police side of immigration, of the Department of Homeland Security. And it's changed a lot, but the concept of cruelty is the main line. So when I went to the border the first time, it was 2004, I was a student. And the detention was a trailer where they would hold people, throw 3 apples, wait 24 hours, and see who would give up and decide to leave. Now it's obviously like a lot more systemic. Something that folks don't recognize is the fact that there are $78 billion for ICE. And there were 70 more approved 2 weeks ago, meaning 140, whatever. My number is not exact, but it's 140 something $billion. That is a whole lot of money You have Geo and Core Civic that are the main two detention center companies that are privately owned that I have been fighting for many years. The first time I stepped foot in a detention center trailer in Dilley, Texas, where I had to sign an NDA, where I couldn't say anything about what I saw or what we did or anything. There was a ticking clock at the top of the trailer that would say the stock exchange for the company that day. So it's a business. It is the business of, I had so many women that were suicidal and they would send them back and send them with a Tylenol 5 minutes later. We've lost 50 people since Trump took office inside detention centers of all ages and different health, different colors, different countries, different. So this is a crisis that has been happening for a long time. This is not new. Like Dilley has been holding children since I know it existed in Dilley. But these places are established in very depleted economic areas of the states that cannot deny this economic opportunity for their community. So they make these deals where some deals are, you don't really need to cover 500 beds. We'll charge the town, 500 beds regardless of the amount of people you hold. Some other places, it's you got to have 500 people in here in order for us to be able to pay you that much. So you got to catch as many people as possible. And so I think, there's so much that can go in there. And I think it's hard not to talk about that without really contextualizing immigration historically and like how we sort of forced people to choose to stay or leave in the 80s. 70s, people would come and go. And so folks don't want to leave. I didn't want to leave my country. But we forced them to decide. I mean, that's for another time. But essentially, we have a government that, like Francisco is saying, it is this idea of demonizing, dehumanizing, and then they're holding hundreds of U.S. citizens. And people are still not affected. If you look brown, if there's anything suspicious, they'll hold you. And so it's really frightening. I think folks don't realize how scary it is this time where now we're also being monitored through our devices. I'm scared that they'll come after me, even though there's no reason, but I'm prepared and I have to have all these screens and all these different things. So the situation is really hard. It's sad. There's a lot of people that aren't running because how you have to run with your residency card or your passport. We have families like Francisco is saying. I was just talking to a mom 2 nights ago where her husband was detained. He's been in there 3 months and their 10-year-old is depressed and sad, and they have a child with special needs. And this poor 10-year-old is scared because he's going to have to take care of his kids if his mom gets caught going to work. And these are people that are sustaining our country. They're the ones that are taking care of our children. They're the ones that take care of our elders in hospitals, the ones that take care of our land, of our food, our farm workers. And so it's really, I don't think the alarm is sounding loud enough. I don't think people are connecting the dots. I think the media is doing a terrible job. We should be still talking about the Twin Cities. We should be talking about these activists, and instead we're not. And I know that there's fatigue, but I've been doing this since I stepped foot in this country 23 years ago. And I still believe in democracy. I still believe in this country. I still believe that, but we have to fight for it.
People, and you've talked about this, many of the immigrants and people there, they don't understand their rights. And you've talked about there is these indigenous people within these countries that are coming here that don't speak the language. It's not Spanish. It's these languages that are very unique. And so it's this compounded problem of these people. We use symbols, I've been doing so much work about teaching people's rights. And so I actually would teach you, Cristina, not your mom, if I met you at the border, because your mom is too freaked out and stressed about how am I going to make this work. So I actually teach the children their rights, and I teach them through fortune tellers and through play. You have the right to go to a library. You have the right to go to school. You can call the cops if there's abuse. All of these simple things that folks don't
because we come, like Francisco said, we're submissive. We were taught to follow rules, and like if we're very kind, we're very giving people, and we definitely give people the benefit of the doubt. And so that becomes a problem when you have to stand up for yourself, when you have systems like capitalism taking advantage of you. And so we need allies, and we need people keeping an eye on each other. I love that Neeraj is that you guys are doing this podcast, and that you are helping people and making sure that they understand their rights, because that's the first thing: dehumanize and take away their rights and their understanding and their access to education.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about this in trail running too. And Cristina, I know you've mentioned this, and Neeraj, you brought this up too. But Cristina, talk about how, and you've talked about this, how when you get to a trail race, you're not represented. You feel, and Neeraj too, you can jump in too, but you feel lonely. You feel unrepresented. Why is that happening? And Jason, you could jump in too, because I know you did an article with what were they called? We Run Long, and they talked about in the BIPOC communities the financial and the safety barriers. I'd like the three of you to jump in and talk about why that is happening and what's happening at our trail races.
Well, I think there's a lot of layers to that. I think you see people that are afraid to show up because they're undocumented, or they don't want to run carrying their passport, right? Have to carry extra identity, or some sort of identification on them. So I think safety is a big layer. But I mean, why would I sign up to a race where I'm seeing like 70-80% of the start line is white males? So I think just the lack of representation kind of has this cycle. You don't want to sign up to a race that doesn't have the representation, and it just creates this cycle. But I'm seeing some glimmers of change. So I think there's hope. But so I have this extra layer of, especially these longer ultras. There's not enough female representation, and you see this big push of here's for the women's race, which I think is a good start. But what if you're a woman of color, or a woman that is not able-bodied, has some sort of disability, or you are not a woman, but you are non-binary, right? And so you are anything but a white Caucasian male. And so I think that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to help uplift not just women and to create these equal start lines, but also other minority groups to create that representation. And like I said, the Hero for the Women's Race is like a good start there, but I've seen that reaching out directly to race directors and organizations, and just being upfront, having very direct conversations about where do you stand, and what are you planning to do about this. And so we were talking before the podcast here, but Luke Nelson with Scout Mountain Ultras has been wonderful. The race directors for Freestone Endurance in Colorado we reached out to me when I was on the board of directors for Women of the Wasatch, and we had a one-on-one conversation about what actionable things can we be doing at our races to make things more representative. I think even Snow Peaks here, local to Salt Lake City this year, reached out and said, what can we do? Here's some race entries, to help bring more people of color to the start line. So, I think there's a lot that is happening, but so much more that needs to be done. But I think that's how I feel a small way that is within my power to just directly reach out to organizations and say, where do you stand? And what actionable things can we do here? And hopefully that creates a snowball effect, and ultimately does create, big waves of change that we so desperately need in the trail running community.
I don't want to get anybody in trouble. What about some of our big race communities. I want to
get them
mention
in trouble,
Aravaipa.
dude. Like the only way this stuff changes is if
Jason,
we put
there
them in
you
trouble,
go.
man.
Jason,
Like,
what about
seriously.
Aravaipa? What about Daybreak Racing? What about some of these? We love them, and they are doing some things, guys. But are they doing enough?
No.
Do they need to do
No.
more?
Like if you look at Aravaipa's imagery, you don't see people of color there. You just don't. You go to an Aravaipa event, there is no pride flag. And across the years, countries are represented on flags up and down the corridor there, but there is no pride flag there. Like, look, I'm Puerto Rican, but my complexion says white, right? People who have privilege like me need to stand up and talk about this stuff and tell people you have to do better. Otherwise, this stuff's never going to change.
Yeah, but the problem is you speak up and then you are blacklisted if you speak up.
Carolina, can I only because this is very fresh on my mind. There is a local race here to Salt Lake City, and the race directors have a very well-known podcast. And they came out as a joke, to counter the Here for the Women's Race shirts. Their idea of a joke was to come out with shirts that said Here for the Men's Meat spelled MEAT. And so that was obviously extremely offensive. And when they were confronted by this, by somebody locally that's very vocal, lovely friend of mine, instead of just acknowledging that, okay, I'm sorry that I offended people with this shirt, they doubled down and said, they're kind of like blacklisting her, saying like, fuck counterculture or cancel culture, fuck cancel culture, and kind of really doubling down on this. And as a woman of color, I see, women are offended by the shirt. And I said, if they're acting like this on like Here for the Women's Race and like deciding to make a joke about it, what are their thoughts on women of color or, other minority groups? And I 100% don't feel safe going to their races now or even having any of the members in my community go to their races if not only are they like just being neutral on racism and the current political state of immigration, but they're actively creating harm and doubling down on that. And it's been heartbreaking to see that. Wow, I chose to see the trail running community with rose lenses, and I'm trying to see the good that's happening, but then see direct contrast of I'm creating harm and doubling down on it. Has just been like very eye-opening.
And I'll take that one step further. So you've got people that will double down and then blacklist you. And then I had, there was the whole, I can't even remember, but Jamil Khoury had his burrito league, right? And Kelly Newland made a post about how, not thinking about what burrito means, and like people can't run the same segment if you're an immigrant. Like it's kind of scary because like the cops, it was the height of.
Was that in January?
Yeah. And I actually reached out to him on Instagram and I was like, I want to talk to you. And he actually called me back. And we had a conversation where I explained to him why I love that there's camaraderie in Burrito League. Like, I'm not trying to yuck your yum. However, certain people cannot participate in this moment. Call it like some sort of hoagie run or some other thing. But there's just so many things that are kind of wrong about it. He was really receptive. I told him you need emergency plans of action. Like, you have to make sure that folks feel safe in your space. Listened. But there's really nothing happening beyond that, I feel like I have all of these conversations with people, and I was actually surprised that he immediately wanted to have a conversation with me because like I've reached out to other people and like he's a busy guy, but he, we had a long conversation and, but I don't see anything happening to, for change. So it's like, it's not just listening. It's listening and acting upon it. I want action. We're over the listening and me telling you there's plenty of resources out there. Listen to my podcast, listen to RunTri. Like, look, there's many, listen to Cristina, listen to you. Like, there's enough talk. Like, we need to actually see action. We need to see Western states provide an entry that is perpetual for Indigenous people, that is perpetual. Don't lean into like the brands. Like, this is what races should be doing now in order to attract the people so that we feel less alone, so that you tell us that you're really an ally and not just say, we don't really care about DEI, because guess what? We don't need to do that anymore.
Neeraj, I want to ask you, you are running Western States for the second time, and I know you can talk about, you almost didn't go out to the Hurt 100 because it was at a time when everything was in turmoil. Neeraj, how do you feel about Western States? Do you feel safe, and do you feel represented on that start line? I know we all love that race, but I would be curious to know.
Yeah, I want to say something real quick. I know I was my thing was cutting in and out. I'm going to say something about what Carolina said a little while back. And it was about I know this is going off track here, about the amount of money that ICE has and what the government is doing. I think that is tremendously scaring a lot of people. My allies here in Kentucky are getting, white people, they're getting scared. It's being done to scare allies. And the hardest thing that I'm having is like people are not being vocal about supporting immigrants because they are so scared. And my own family, my adopted family, boy, they are, they're 80, 85, and they're like, oh my gosh, we support it, but we are, they don't say it outright, but it's just creating terror among the allies, among my allies. Anyway, coming to Western, being safe, it's actually Sahil, my older son. He came to me and he said, Dad, do you have a contingency plan? I said, what do you mean? He said, Dad, maybe I should write a letter to the race director to tell them what you did last year, because I'm worried about something happening to you in a remote part of Western states. And this is my Sahil is he's kind of like one of those kids. He's like 21, but he sounds like a 50-year-old. And he was like, Dad, I think you should have some kind of a plan of what to do if something doesn't go right. And I don't know where he got that from. Maybe I think there was a spine race in England where this lady had to be pulled off. And I am nothing like, she is amazing for what she had done and spoken about the atrocities. I think it was in the Middle East. I don't know whether it was Iran or one of the countries. But so I do have that sense of, what if, but it's gonna be okay. And I'm gonna be there, and it inspires me to just move. I don't know where I'm gonna go. Hopefully finish it in time. But there is and travel too. I mean, I'm a brown guy. I can easily get. I've been in airports where I feel like in Chicago, I was traveling and they set up a special security, portable security scan before you boarded the plane. And I know a lot of that, this is years back, was because of me, because I was carrying some work stuff. So I had a couple of big bags. And of course, I got pulled aside and searched. So I don't know. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to show up. My coach is ready. We're going to get this done. But, do I have some thing in the back of my mind that worries? Because I worry more about the safety of my kids and my family and you guys and my crew, but it's okay.
That's why we need these discussions, guys. That's not right. You should not feel that way. I don't feel you should feel that way. I want to start to talk about some of the solutions, but Jason, I want to like I said, you're our media expert. Are we doing enough in the media, in the podcasts, on social media, and Instagram?
No.
We're not doing enough? What's going on there, Jason?
Not even close. Not even close. So the logo we have on our platform is a pride flag. And 3 years ago, starting on June 1st, put the pride flag up. Come June 30th, I was like, I'm going to take it down and go back to our normal colors. And I realized in that moment that people in the queer community don't stop being queer on July 1st. No different than Black people don't stop being Black when Black History Month ends, when Hispanic History Month ends, we don't stop being it, right? And I was like, I'm going to leave this up. And somebody, I'm sure, would say that was a bold move. I thought it was just a human move. It was letting people know that they are humans and this is a supportive space. And the reason why I use supportive space, Joey, and you used safe space earlier, is because I think the phrasing safe space has been hijacked to be a negative connotation so that people are like, oh, you need a safe space, right? And I just don't, like, words have meaning. And so I let people know this is a supportive space. Yes, you are safe here. We're going to support you. And I've had more than one person come to me and say, I am willing to talk to you because you have a pride flag all year long on your logo. And it's not just people in the queer community. Native Americans, Indigenous people, Hispanics, Blacks, like they have come to me and said, I'm happy to talk to you because if you're going to put this logo front and center, then I know you will listen to me and you will take care of my story in the right way. And so I think if people want to tout that they are inclusive and that they want to promote diversity, they have to show it. They can't just keep talking about it. Carolina mentioned this earlier. We're done with the talking. Start showing with action. I had April Pullins, who is a Black female runner, on my podcast that came out yesterday on Tuesday. Let me give the date. Came out on June 16th, since this is not debuting right now.
It's a great episode. Already listened.
And she said that she's going to do a half marathon in Montana. And she said, I'm not worried that they're going to pull out a gun on me. She's just more worried about whether or not she's going to be welcomed. Now think about that for a minute, right? Like the idea of being welcomed at a running event just because she's a Black female is beyond me. And so I just think we need to do more. It's upon me. Like I can't expect somebody else to do more if I'm not doing more, right? And so I want to do more. I want to interview more people of color. I want to interview more queer people. I want to interview more women. And I want to prove that our slogan that I started 6 years ago is actually something that we're working on actively, not just passively.
Jason, when did you decide to do that? To maybe you've always done that with Everyday Athlete Podcast Network and RunTriBike. I mean, I've only was introduced to you a year and a half or so ago. Has that always been your philosophy, or was there something that happened you were like, I gotta lean into this hard? Always.
It was always my philosophy, and this is one of the funnier stories about starting this business. I had family members say to me, we don't do that, meaning we don't swim, bike, and run. And I'm like, who's this we? Like, I'm literally doing it. Not only am I doing it, I'm starting a company over it. So we as Puerto Ricans, we're already putting ourselves behind the 8 ball, right? Before we even have somebody else telling us we can't do it, we're telling ourselves we can't do it. And so just hearing that from my own family, I was like, there's got to be other people who have family members who are telling them that they shouldn't be swimming, cycling, and running either. And I'm like, that's nonsense. We belong in those places just as much as anybody else.
Jason, I 100%, like, to this day, I've been running now for over a decade, and, you know, I'll call my mom and she'll be like, no salgas afuera sola, like, it's not safe to go outside, period. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm just exercising, I'm just going on a trail run, but it's like, no salgas afuera sola. And so, you know, my own parents are like, they're supportive of me generally running, but not by myself.
Yeah. Carolina, we're going to talk about, I want to talk about some of the great things everyone here is doing and what our communities are doing to make a difference. And I know, Carolina, you've got your hands literally on clay on all kinds of things. Francisco, though, I want to come back to you. I want you to tell everyone, Francisco, he leads COPAL. And first tell us, COPAL is the acronym. What's the actual name of the organization?
Sure. It is Communities Organizing Latino Power in Action.
Right. And you founded that, correct?
I'm one of the founders, yes.
One of the founders? When did you when did that get
That
started?
was 2018, and some of the board members, by the way, is a good friend, Henry, whose mom is from El Salvador and dad from Mexico. And he always proudly said that he's 100% Salvadorian, 100% Mexican, and he was born in Nevada. So that came to my mind, Cristina, when you were mentioning about your parents as well. So the organization was in 2018 when we put it together. It was one of those things where one person, I was one of the people who quit my job, began this organization, obviously without any money. So we began, now we have about 40 employees in the organization. And it was back in 2024, December, when we created the Immigrant Defense Network, which is a network of organizations that has been responding to ICE activity. And the organization recently, one of my colleague, Carolina Ortiz, was recognized by the John F. Kennedy Foundation for the recognizing the work that we have done in Minnesota. So we were one of 4 recipients of that.
Just to interrupt you very briefly, the one thing I love about that, Francisco, the 4 people they chose, all women.
Yes.
And I just thought that was so beautiful. Anyways, continue.
So, and so that's in the organization, that's a range of things. But one of the things was, the question is, I did work for another nonprofit, and my theory is human services are key to solve immediate needs. It's like if you're hungry, you need to eat. But then the big question is, why are you hungry? Why you need to come back to look for food? What are the systemic issues that forces you? And so we decided to create this organization in what we call a hybrid model, where we meet people for some of the things that they need, but our job is to support them to become leaders, agents of system change, and participate in identifying issues impacting their communities. So we do a lot of legislative work where we identify issues and we figure out how to introduce a bill. But also we use elections as a key to understand that in the evolution of system change, elections is a tool, remains a tool. And let's keep using that tool to provoke those system change that we need. And that can go in various ways. And then as people, we believe that when you are in your community, that's your place, that's your home, that's a place that you care about. And how do you get invested to ensure that that place is safe and is what you need? But we understand that there are barriers as well. And our job is to figure out those barriers and figure out how we can tear them down so we can achieve what anyone wants, a better life.
Yeah, amazing. Carolina, you've got your hands on a lot of things in the arena of actionable advocacy. I want to first tell us about Touching Land, right? Tell us about that organization, how you came up with it, what the concept is, and how you incorporate art.
Yeah, I mean, Touching Land was also started around 2017, I think, 18, during first Trump.
Kind of weird, that timing, right? What was the administration
right?
at that time? I wonder.
No, but essentially, I started doing work with the ACLU, doing Know Your Rights workshops, and I noticed people weren't really getting anything. It's like, you can't talk these legal words, and like when people can't interact and just sort of ask questions, folks left more confused than they did when they came in. So I figured I needed a tool that was calming, and so that's when Clay came in. And so I started doing Know Your Rights workshops for immigrants, about 15 to 17 people at a time, where we use Clay as a analogy, but also a tool to calm people, for them to, we come to this country with the same tools. So this idea of the analogy of clay and how you can rebuild your life just like you're building something that you imagine. But the power of having an idea, building it with your hand, and then having it become reality is really such a beautiful process. And it reminds you that you can achieve what you imagine. And so we teach them their rights. We show them what does a orden de cateo, what does a warrant look like? How do I ask for better wages? How do I make sure I get a Metzger card? So sort of like a one-stop stop kind of situation. And so that has developed where now we do also food. So we have Fourth Amendment salsa making. We bring delivery workers into companies and we make food together. And even if there's no exchange of language, there is that humanizing the people that are invisible and that we don't really account for. And then my favorite, I think, now that I've been able to mix running is the Running Rights and Land program that started 2 years ago. It actually started thanks to a HOCA grant after I ran Western States. And I essentially started, I don't know if you guys remember, 2 years ago, Governor Abbott in Texas started shipping people to DC, New York, and also Chicago, mostly West African men, Black men. And so I wanted to do something for them because folks were being treated really poorly. So I would collect shoes for my runners, for people. I would drop them off in shelters, and then I wanted to run with them. So I started this program where I not only bring immigrants in shelters, but we run with allies. So it's a program that mixes both communities together. We make sure that immigrants have shoes, a whole kit so they can run. We have a changing room, tent, all the things they need because they have a bag that they travel with all of their belongings. So this idea of building a space that gives them dignity, that gives them community, we make sure that most of them are orphans. So we make sure they have guardians, that they have doctors, that we can sign waivers so they can go play basketball in the YMCA, something so simple, but so enriching and so changing in your life. And so it's been really beautiful because the idea is a 10-week program where we talk about climate action. We not only provide education for immigrants, but also for the allies, so they understand that incarceration changes block to block, that pollution changes, from the Bronx to Manhattan, it's very different. And so this idea of showing how running is a tool to really, show the inequities of the world, and also the power we give them tools. This is how you call this number, and you get a tree that's going to be planted in the street so that the tree canopy can reduce the heat of this community so that, they have the equal opportunities as other communities. So it's been really incredible. We run it's about 40 people. And at the end, we run a 5K, a 10K, or a half marathon together. We started only with Black men, mostly, and allies in the neighborhood. Now it's mixed, and we have kids as little as 5 and as old as 81.
Wow.
So it's a really cool program. We are talking with someone in Idaho that's going to try to mimic the program. We have GIS mapping that is beautiful around routes and around all of these issues and statistics. The problem is now with ICE, things have really changed. A lot of programs, a lot of plans, a lot of things that we were working on really got destroyed as a result of Trump taking office. We've had to sort of tone down the rights education a little bit and find more joy and more belonging and focus on that piece because I don't want people's nervous systems to go haywire. And so I think that that's a piece that folks don't realize that have that power, where this is an anxiety that doesn't leave our bodies. This is an anxiety that is forever constant wherever we go. And so when we're running and we're doing a race, I felt very safe when I ran Western States. I'm not sure it's going to be the same if I ran it today, I don't think it'll be the same because people are really coming out of the woodworks when it comes to their political affiliation and some others are defending, but I think it's a different world. And because it hasn't changed for a lot of people, because you don't really see it, like Jason is saying, it doesn't feel like anything has changed and that nothing really has to change. And so that's why I think it's so important for people to share their stories and to demand, right? I mean, I feel like I don't want to, there's a fine line between, and I love Jordan Whetstone talks about calling people in, which is sort of what I did with Jamil, where I'm like, I don't want to trash you, but also I would like to have a conversation. And and like, what's the plan? What are we doing? I hope more people did that.
Not call them out, call them in.
Yeah.
I like that.
Right, and I think it's the idea of making mistakes. I think people think we're all a finished product, and making mistakes is part of doing the work. And no one's going to attack you for trying to do something good if it doesn't come out perfect, you know? It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah. Jason.
I had Jordan on a podcast a few months ago, and that's exactly what she said, Carolina. She said, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to ask questions of me, trying to bring people together. It's okay that you don't know everything. And I think that's one of the things that their allies do want to be allies, but I think they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, acting the wrong way, and offending in some senses, insulting in others. But we have to tell them, like, it's okay to ask a question, because we can tell the difference between asking a question because you care and asking a question because you're an asshole. Like, we can tell the difference. So when you care, when you ask a question because you care, we can feel that and we understand that. We'll be more than happy to educate you on the process. When you come at it from an asshole's perspective, yeah, that's going to be a problem. And so I think, like, if we can let people who want to be allies also understand, you're going to make mistakes. Look, I'm going to answer a question differently than Francisco, than Carolina, than Cristina, because we all have different backgrounds too. I'm going to answer a question a little bit differently, and that's okay as long as we're having conversation, and then we take those conversations and we move them into action.
Yeah. Cristina, I want to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned the Wasatch, how do I say that?
Wasatch Trail Collective.
Thank you. You founded that, correct?
Co-founded
it. Mm-hmm. And that, talk about what that started as. I know, and it's kind of become, you guys are showing up all over the place, not just on trails. It's really become this force of activism and protest, right? Talk a little bit more about how that's developed.
Yeah, I think the initial conversation was actually started with my good friend Shani Weston. We were both part of Women of the Wasatch, and we were like, we're kind of the only two like brown people here. And she jokingly said we should just start our own trail running group. And I said, well, no, that's not a joke. That's actually a great idea. Like, let's do it. And so the original intention was a trail running group, but in creating this space, it's blossomed into so much more than just a trail running group. There's a lot of road runners, people go backpacking, biking, there's a book club, and people have now, organized and are doing other things for the community too. We, 3 years ago, started a Dia de los Muertos 5K. Salt Lake City is very white. And so we wanted to bring some culture to the community and education on our culture. Because we are not a 501c3, we wanted to support and fundraise for other nonprofits in the community that are, investing in the Latino community. And so the first year, we partnered with Comunidades Unidas, and they do a lot of social programs, and a lot of healthcare programs too. This year, we're looking into partnering with the Salt Lake City Bail Fund, which is an organization that's really highlighting, the harmful money bail system that exists that's, disproportionately affecting people of colors and honestly, criminalizing poverty essentially. With that organization this year, they've done a lot of training, and they have volunteers that accompany people to their immigration hearings. And so we just really want to support other organizations that are also putting in the work and highlighting that, while also just sprinkling in our culture and just showing Latino joy, because we are, at the root of it, we're very joyful, loving people. And it's just sad to see that we're being dehumanized and criminalized, and they're trying to bring us down. But I think at the root of it, we are our light won't be dimmed.
Good. And how's the community responding to that? I know, here in Minneapolis, like Francisco and I will tell you, it's a melting pot, and we love our community and we're very receptive. Are you finding good response from that out in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, actually, it's been great response.
Good.
We, initially we were like, we're the only two brown runners, and we realized, no, we're not. There's actually a lot of other people of color in the community that, are just running alone. And so I think it's created a space. And I like, Jason, earlier that you said it's a supported space, not a safe space. We've had this conversation about, we want to call it a safe space, but truly when there, are attacks on people of color and you're afraid of getting arrested and deported at all, and, anytime you leave the house, go grocery shopping, is a space ever truly safe in today's political climate? So I love, earlier that you referenced a supported space. And so I hope that we are creating a very supportive and loving space with Wasatch Trail Collective.
This is awesome, guys. I've been watching the clock. We've run a little bit long. I know we started late. I want to be respectful of our time. I want to start to wrap it up. And Neeraj has been texting me, and he's having trouble connecting. So I will get his closing comments, and he and I have to record an introduction to this as well. I want to kind of wrap this up. I kind of want to go around and see if anyone has final thoughts, final messages. What people can do, what you think needs to be done to ignite our neighbors in our communities to help with these issues. Jason, I'm going to start with you.
I thank you for starting with me because I was going to volunteer anyway. So one of the things that has been said throughout this conversation, and I lost count, was the word dehumanizing. It was said so many times in this conversation, and I'm sure there are people who are going to ask themselves, I don't know what that means. What are you talking about? And so I've wrote down some examples, and I'm coming from the media side. I've worked in television and advertising for 30 years. And when we think about the Black community, we think about drugs because that's how the media portrays it. When we think about the Hispanic community, Francisco mentioned it earlier, we think about stealing because that's how the media portrays it. When we think about Indigenous and Native Americans, we think about them scalping because spaghetti westerns, that's what they showed us. When we think about the queer community, we think about sexual deviance because that's what the media shows us. And so all of that leads to dehumanizing, which again is a word that I lost count on and what it was being and how many times it was said in this conversation. And we've only been talking for an hour. If we can stop dehumanizing people and recognize the person in front of us for who they are, not who we saw on Law & Order SVU, not who we saw in the movie Training Day or in a spaghetti western, but the person in front of us. When we have a conversation, we will figure out and find out more times than not that we have more in common with that person than we don't. And once we can do that, then we start to realize that they are human beings who have traumas and successes just like we do, and now we can help each other out. So those are my parting words. Like, we have to just stop with the dehumanization, and it starts with folks like myself in the media space.
Thank you. Francisco, closing thoughts. What can we do? How do we make all communities like Minneapolis that we just don't back down and we stand up for our neighbors no matter what it takes? What do other communities need to do to be like Minneapolis?
I asked this question previously to a group of members of the white community. What do they think happened? And so a few people have said that George Floyd situation was an awakening moment for a lot of people, and and then what happened with ICE was a momentum for those experiences from the George Floyd. I think we have a lot of media now. Obviously, media doesn't mean information. Good information is a lot of things that we need to do to create that vision of the world that we want. And so I think the battles that we have ahead of us is a battle of ideas about vision and inclusive vision of communities against others that is exclusive and denying access to others. I think we need to be creative to keep promoting our vision of that world, and conversations, and also reaching out to those who don't seem to be totally in tune with us, because the idea is not that it's just a few of us thinking and feeling good about it. It's about reaching out to those who are not there yet. In Minneapolis or Minnesota, my understanding that when the Metro search happened, about 62% of the population of Minnesota was not happy with what they saw, which is great. Our job is to keep educating ourselves, our communities. The integration of our communities of color is stronger now, and with the white community, but we got to keep doing it, and also reaching out to those who are not in tune with us, because we want them as well.
Yeah. Cristina, you've just become the leader of the UTMB races, Aravaipa, Daybreak. What are you going to do? What would you do if you were leading all those race organizations to make them more inviting to people of color, Indigenous people?
I think the first thing is these, larger race organizations need to make sure that they're having discussions with those communities directly and say, how can we best support these communities? That's step one. I don't think anybody has the answers or the solutions. Otherwise, things would have been fixed by now. But I think the answers do lie in those communities. And so I think, if UTMB, just as an example, actually, UTMB Speed Goat in Salt Lake City partnered this year with Women of the Wasatch, and has, at least the North American rep, has been involved in what can we do in helping to create equal start lines, 50-50 representation, right? Well, I think that conversation needs to go a lot further than just equal 50-50 start lines. But I think that's where you start. You just start having conversations. You find the groups that are for people of color. You find the groups that are for disabled runners, for out trails, for queer runners, and say, how can we best support these community and uplift these communities and create these supportive spaces for these communities. So I think that's step one.
Yeah. Carolina, final thoughts, things people can do that are beyond listening and actionable?
Yeah, I agree with Cristina and with all of you, with Jason and Francisco. I think UTMB is actually trying, surprisingly. They're doing a great job with adaptive athletes as well. They are listening and they are taking action, even though they're a huge corporation, something that TrailCon is not doing, and something, they really messed up, and it's the second year. I think it's very frustrating to continuously tell you what you're doing wrong as someone that can see it, and then be completely ignored, and then pretend women are not thinking about, if I'm getting pregnant, I can't do a race in Texas or in all of these states, because if I have an ectopic pregnancy, I could die. These are things that women are thinking about, and folks are not thinking about that, or the people. These are things that matter, and things that we should be talking about, because it is affecting 50% of the population of runners, or in the US. So I think actually listening to the people that have the expertise, moving into action, having emergency plans. If you are, Women of the Wasatch, you could offer emergency plans workshops, or races. You should have an emergency plan so that Neeraj feels safe, so that he knows, okay, what's the plan? If I shows up here, what are you going to do to defend me? How is the race going to protect me as a racer in this moment right now? And so these are the things that should be happening and should be implemented. And to get one step further, have parties where you put some money in the commissary of people in ICE and detention. That's something that I do a bunch. Have a few friends, talk about, your history. I feel like it really doesn't take a lot. It just really takes the will of, how can I support you, and let me know, there's so many ideas. I think it's really, maybe it takes another George Floyd to happen, so that folks are excited to care. But with the disappearance of DEI and budgets from brands, from companies, it's been really sad to see how folks are not outspoken about it. So I think actually speaking about it is important, even if it's just in your Instagram.
Yeah. Before we go, Cristina, I asked you if you would read something you wrote recently. She posted something recently on Instagram, and it really moved me. And I thought, when I thought of this group and this discussion, I thought it's kind of an appropriate closing message. Would you be willing to read that?
I would be, yeah. And just as a backstory, I am running Western States this year. I'm one of the recipients of the GU sponsored spot. And I do want to acknowledge that the two sponsored runners this year from GU are Tov Shin, who's from Mongolia. He's a Mongolian immigrant. And then myself, who's a child of immigrant. So, even though we're seeing these DEI efforts and funds being taken away, I think there are still brands that are, putting, a step forward and are still putting in the work and not just giving a race entry spot, but just supporting to the fullest extent. And so that's where this post kind of came from, and it's just my motivations or my why for running Western States, one of my whys. But I do want to make sure that this is like a blueprint for other women of color, to show that like somos poderosas, we can do it. And so it says, this is for the brown kids, the pochas, the no sabo kids, the children of immigrants that had to assimilate for survival. This is for the kids that have struggled with belonging, identity, and self-worth in a place that wasn't built for them, but thrived anyways. You are brown and beautiful, and you belong. You always have and always will. Esto es para ti. Time to shake some ass and sprinkle some Latin joy at Western States.
Yay!
I love that. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this conversation, and I hope we change some minds, we make some difference, we get people talking, we get some action going. I hope that's what comes from this, and I appreciate you all for joining me.
Thanks, Joey.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you.